Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down, run them down.
Hello there, folks. All right, we're back again to talk about the next segment in the Evidence Against Stephen Avery series. And today we're going to be talking about the bullet that was found in the garage. And we're going to be talking about the burn barrel that contained the remains or the burned remnants of Teresa's cell phone and camera. Okay? Again, finding a slug on the property in Stephen's garage that was eventually then tested and was reported to have Teresa's DNA on the bullet. Okay? So, right on the surface, yes, that is a very damning fact, or seemingly damning fact. It certainly looks like, well, it certainly gives you the question of how would that have gotten there, right? So it certainly looks like something that's very convincing in the direction of Stephen's guilt on the surface, right? Then you have the burn barrel that was found just on the edge of the Avery property, out in front of Stephen's trailer. Just on the edge, there was a little cornfield right next to the property, in between the Avery property and Highway 147, I believe it is. There's this cornfield, and right on the edge of that cornfield, there was a barrel. And they claim that's the barrel where they found the burned remnants of Teresa's cell phone and her camera. Well, again, with the barrel being so close, it's closer to Stephen's than it is to anybody else. It's still pretty far away from the trailer. It's still, it's on the border of where this cornfield starts, but it's still kind of far away from the trailer, but close enough that having those items in it does look incriminating towards Stephen. So that's why when and you guys have seen, we've done the video of the evidence against Stephen Avery, where I talked about all the bones and things that went on with the bones. Obviously why they look incriminating on the surface, but then went beneath the surface on it and kind of illustrated that there was a lot more going on. Then we went with part 2 of the Evidence Against Stephen Avery series, where I was talking about the RAV4 and the issues with a lot of the evidence surrounding the RAV4. The blood in it, the key, the many, many things that when you look at it, you'd think it looks like solid evidence on the surface, but when you just look at it, when you scratch the surface just a little bit, you see all kinds of problems and issues and things that get you wondering how it got there. And today's not going to be any different. Today is not going to be any different. I obviously will absolutely, acknowledge the fact that, yes, the stuff being there certainly looks incriminating. But why, as what happens with people who are just trying to make it look incriminating but aren't thinking about a convincing narrative, and they're just putting pieces in places that will look incriminating, that's what tips a lot of us off to go finding and looking for all the problems that we've found, because we know that the things don't line up, and there has to be a reason to explain that, right? So we start with this bullet. I'm going to show you guys a picture of it right here, and we'll come on. All right, so folks, this is the magic bullet. I bring this up because I have serious issues with this. And those people out there that are like in construction, who have worked with concrete or breaking up concrete before, are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. They're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. You see all this concrete dust you're seeing all over around this thing. Look, all this stuff here, all of that over there, all this stuff here, all this stuff you see going underneath the bullet here. That's all concrete dust. Okay? All concrete dust. This concrete dust got there when they were jackhammering the crack in the garage, because they were sure that they were going to find signs of Teresa in that crack, or blood, something. They didn't. But they jackhammered that crack. Do you see what's interesting here? Do you notice that this bullet that's supposed to have been there since the 31st is sitting on top of the concrete dust. Okay, the bullet would have been there before the concrete dust. So how is it that this bullet has zero concrete dust and is sitting on top of the veins of concrete dust? This is the question that you have to ask yourself, because if that bullet were there when when that crack were being jackhammered, it would also be covered with dust. And you can even see on top, it's kind of bowl-shaped. It's kind of concave, like bowl-shaped. There would undoubtedly be some concrete dust and stuff in that concave shape on the top of the bullet there. So this is another one of the main issues with the Avery and Dassey cases.
Okay. So, what's so odd about this bullet? Obviously, you heard me explaining some of the things there. I mean, but let's get into the DNA of it. Before I go back to what I was addressing while we were looking at that picture of the bullet there, let's talk about the DNA. Most of you know, you've watched Making a Murderer, you know it was well established in the documentary that the bullet was the last item that Sherry Culhane had at the crime lab. It was the final last item she had to test, and up to that point, she had still not been able to find any trace of Teresa Halbach anywhere in the trailer or in the garage. And it was the last piece. Okay? I'm just letting you know these things because these things set up a, desired outcome. Or at least what looks like very much like a desired outcome, because you also see very well covered in the documentary that Tom Fassbender had sent her an email specifically asking her to place Teresa somewhere in the trailer or in the garage. So she had an actual email from a DOJ investigator, a lead investigator in this investigation, asking her to place Teresa in the trailer in the garage. So that must put a little pressure on her. Then you also hear established, and here's the really tricky part, because like I said, it was the last piece of evidence to test. It was the final piece to test in the hopes that they would find a trace of Teresa on it. They test it, and it comes back with Teresa's DNA, but in the testing, in the control sample, Sherry Culhane gets her DNA. Somehow Sherry's DNA gets mixed in to the one of the control samples. Well, this seems odd, right? The defense wasn't allowed to be there for the fear of contamination or potential contamination, yet here we have the lab tech themselves contaminating it somehow. We also hear in the documentary where Jerry actually questions her, and we find out that she actually had a bunch of Teresa Halbach's stuff, belongings, and things that had her DNA still at her workstation. Now, keep in mind, this is in March. This bullet was collected in March. This is all 4 months after the original investigation and stuff, right? So she still has these like personal items of Teresa's at her workstation. So it leads you to this wonder, because it was the final piece of evidence. It suddenly comes up with Teresa's DNA, but we get Sherry's DNA in the control sample. And so there's all these very strange happenings in terms of the DNA itself. Okay? Just with the DNA on this bullet. There's that whole shenanigans. So she goes, and for the first time in her life, she files a deviation so that she can still submit that bullet as evidence with Teresa's DNA on it, even though the protocol of the lab is, if the control sample gets contaminated like that, is to abandon the test and to deem it inconclusive. But this time, for the first time in her life, she went and filed a deviation so that this could be used as evidence against Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey.
So, that is the strange doings just with the DNA on this bullet. Just strictly with the DNA alone. Okay? So there's those issues. Right? Alright. Now, let's move on to a timeline here. Just so everybody understands, when I show the picture of the bullet again, and I start talking about it again, so that everybody understands the logical progression, so that you understand the problems with the way that this bullet lies there in the picture. Okay, folks, if we're following along with the prosecution's theory, Teresa Halbach was shot by Stephen Avery and or Brendan Dassey in the garage on October 31st. Okay, so October 31st, Teresa's shot. The shots are fired on October 31st. Therefore, the slugs and anything else would be in the garage on October 31st. Okay. We know on 11/5 they find the RAV4 on the Avery property. Pam Stern finds the RAV4. Then we know that they take over the property for 8 days or whatever. Nobody finds this bullet then. Okay? But what they did do during that period, between November 5th and November 15th or whatever it is they jackhammered a crack in Stephen Avery's garage. Okay? So this is definitely after the 31st. They were jackhammering a crack in Stephen Avery's garage. Why were they jackhammering the crack? Because they believed they were going to find traces of Teresa's blood in the crack. Because they believed Stephen Avery had cleaned up the garage so well that there was no trace of her, but they felt that they were going to find traces of her in the crack. So they jackhammered the crack, picked all the pieces up and took them, swabbed them all. All they found was some of Stephen's and some other unknown male DNA profile. And that's what they found. Okay? Important thing is, according to the theory, Teresa is shot and those bullets, those slugs from the .22 rifle should be in the garage on October 31st. The crack gets jackhammered after the 5th of November. So it's after the bullets are laying in the garage, supposedly. Okay. So that's the timeline, right? Teresa shot, then jackhammering of the crack. It's important to understand that those happened in a certain sequential order. Okay. We're gonna go back to the picture of the bullet now, and I'm gonna point out some things in clear. Okay, so you've seen this picture already and heard me voice some of my concerns, but now you've heard me talk about the DNA testing of it and some of the strange things that went on around that. Okay, I was just talking about a timeline about how clearly Teresa had to be shot and these bullets had to be present in the garage prior to any jackhammering taking place. Okay? The jackhammering would have come after the bullet being there. Okay, so keeping that in mind, here we are, we're looking at, there's clearly a fair amount of concrete dust that is actually blocking the view of this very dark colored floor, this light colored dust. There's a bunch of it, you can see, and then there's some places where you can see the floor through. So you can see the vibrations had caused it to form into little veins and little mounds and stuff like that, right? Well, over here you can see there's like a little mound, and there's a little vein that comes off of that mound here, right? And then there's like this other little mound right here. And you can see that this bullet is actually resting on top of this vein, you know, and maybe part of this mound here, but it's on top of that dust. Okay, you understand why I'm pointing that out, right? Because how could this bullet be on top of this dust? There's no way that's possible. Also, look at this bullet and how clean it is. It doesn't have any dust on it. How's that possible? Anybody that's done any kind of concrete breaking up or chipping or anything like that knows that concrete makes a crazy amount of dust. I mean, it makes a great deal of dust, and it gets everywhere. And this bullet would be covered. There would be dust on this little concave little bowl shape in the middle would be filled in with dust. And trust me, this lead bullet, right? Lead being one of the heaviest elements, right, would not have floated to the top of the concrete dust when they were jackhammering the crack. That wouldn't have happened. And it certainly wouldn't have repelled all the concrete dust. This bullet wasn't here when they jackhammered the crack, folks. It wasn't there. It showed up after the jackhammering. That's the truth. Okay, so before we move on to talking about the burn barrels, we have one more thing to address with the bullet. I know you're asking yourself, Eric Jose, yet another? Yes, yet another. Kathleen Zellner got the item FL, the bullet in question, for testing. Originally, it was one of the pieces she was able to obtain for testing. Sent it to the leading expert in the world, Microtrace Labs, Chris Palahniuk, who has the most powerful microscopes in the world and everything. And they examined the bullet. And they've been doing this at Microtrace for a long time. And they're able to detect particles in the surfaces of, slugs from a bullet. Well, here's what they found. Now, this is supposedly supposed to be a bullet fired through Teresa's skull, or through her body, one of 11 bullets fired through her body. It has no trace of any kind of organic human, flesh, but it does have traces of wood and what would appear to be paint. Red paint. Well, that entire garage is red. So this would seem more and more like some bullet that was just picked up, that came through one of the walls when they were shooting at a gopher, and it got picked up. And like I said, with all the questioning going on with the DNA, with everything around this bullet, not a single thing where you can look at with this bullet and go, oh yeah, they did a great job here. No, it's all questionable and suspect in almost every aspect of everything about this bullet. The fact that they get it in March, okay, after coercing Brendan into a confession and pressuring him to say that things happened in the garage. Tom Fassbender specifically pressuring him to say things happened in the garage. Tom Fassbender, as we covered in the RAV4 video, specifically pressuring him to say that Steve went under the hood of the RAV4. Pressuring him and pressuring him and pressuring him until Brendan eventually acquiesced and said something to that effect to please Tom Fassbender and get him off his case. Okay? Similar thing here with them, the way they did that with the hood latch DNA of the RAV4, similar here where they're pushing Brendan to say things happened in the garage, that she was shot in the garage, that sort of stuff. That way they were able to get back into the garage again in March. After they'd spent already 8 days on the salvage yard originally, it didn't find anything, right? Then get back in March and suddenly, ooh, we find this bullet under a compressor, sitting on top of the concrete dust with no concrete dust on it itself. Remember the timeline. The bullet had to be there before the concrete dust. It doesn't work the other way around. The other way around means planting. So, bits of wood and paint. No bone, no human tissue or anything like that. Wood and paint. is what is found in that bullet. All right. That is basically just sums it up for this bullet. It was used at trial because it supposedly had Teresa's DNA on it. Look, I don't know what's going on with this bullet. The shenanigans at the DNA lab, Sherry getting her DNA somehow into the control samples, having Teresa's effects with her DNA effectively still on them nearby and at her workstation. There's just too many things. And then when you look at the obviousness of this bullet and its collection, okay, it couldn't have been sitting on top of the concrete dust. It's just everything about this bullet screams, I'm planted, I was planted. Everything about it screams that. That's why it doesn't work so well as evidence against Stephen Avery anymore. That's kind of the way that works. Okay, now we're going to move on to these burn barrels. These burn barrels, I'm pointing this out essentially because there is some shenanigans going on with the burn barrels, and I don't know if I've gotten to the bottom of it yet. But this is some work done by Wrecking Crew member Moving On 04, who uncovered a great deal of this, what I'm going to show you right now. And I don't know if it's dead-on proof of anything specific yet, but it certainly is showing a kind of like a three-card Monty kind of a situation almost with barrels, which I think is interesting. So I'm going to show it to you right now and kind of show you some of this shifting and strange, incidents in the logging of these barrels. Some things that, maybe you might want to be aware of. And like I said, we'll continue to look into this with these barrels because I've been frustrated about these burn barrels ever since I did my very first video about the bones 3 years ago. Okay, the very first video I did about the bones, when I was trying to track these burn barrels and these bones through the queso reports, and it was a nightmare because they were constantly changing numbers, and it was like so many things were, you couldn't, it was difficult to trace any one thing through the investigation reports because of the way that things were. It just was always so shifty. And I think what I'm going to show you here today is going to show you some of that. So what we're going to start with is a report showing you them collecting some things at the deer camp, which is over in the quarry. So, all right. Okay, folks, this is a report written by Deputy Rick Reamer. This is from the Calumet County Sheriff's Office investigation reports. And it says, on Saturday, 11/12/05. Okay, 11/12, right? Okay. I, Rick Reamer, along with the company myself, assisted by Special Agent Rod Pevito. Okay, so remember that, Pevito. Special Agent Ron Eben. In processing items number 642, number 643, number 644, and number 645. It should be noted that in processing item 643, a 55-gallon burn barrel with miscellaneous items inside, they did find various bone fragments. Okay, and keep in mind this is on the 12th. Go down a little further here. At 10:38 hours, the first piece of bone was located in the burn pile from item 643, burn barrel number 2. The collection of burnt bone pieces and possible tissue pieces was turned over to me. Okay, this is basically on the 12th. I want to point this out because this is interesting. They're talking about burn barrel 2 here, and that is the burn barrel on the Avery property that had what they believed were some of Teresa's cremains in it, right? Here's the rub. I've done several videos about this already. Burn barrel 2 was, number 1, began to be sifted on November 7th by Ertl and his crime scene technician team. They started it on the 7th, put it into their sifters and stuff. At that point in time, it would have been somewhat obvious, as soon as they had put some of the material from in the barrel onto their sifters, that they would have probably seen that there might have been some material there. But let's say they didn't. They came back and finished it either later that day or on the morning of the 8th. All right. So it was finished being sifted on the 7th and 8th by a crime scene technician team. Here we are on the 12th, and these guys are processing it, and they're somehow finding various bone fragments. That's just bizarre to me. How is that possible? Like, am I supposed to believe that Ertl and his team missed these fragments? The other thing is there was 4 burn barrels found on the Avery property. But what we're going to see right now, which is interesting, because burn barrel 4 is one of the burn barrels that while burn barrel 2 was being sifted, burn barrel 4 was sent back to the Avery property. The next day, Ken Kratz asked for it to be brought back from the Avery property. This item right here, 645, you're going to see right now in the next couple documents, disappears. Don't know really what happens to it. But then, this barrel here seems to take its place. This one here that says it has the words Deer Camp burn barrel printed on it. So we'll see what you guys think, but it's damn odd, number one right here, that they're finding more bone fragments on the 12th when it's already been gone through by Ertl and his team. So, alright, moving to the next one. Okay, so, and some of you may remember this from Rubber Ducky's channel. She covered this in one of her videos and everything, but like I said, this all mainly comes from Wrecking Crew member Moving On 04, and this stuff here is basically showing you these are the numbers that were being referred to in the previous documents: 642, 643, 644, and 645, all of which are 55-gallon burn barrels which were found behind the Yonda residence. Okay, and then these other things, you got a door from a Suzuki and 2 sets of keys for master locks. But the important thing is here is that we know that these are the burn barrels. So this burn barrel 2 is burn barrel 2, okay, which was gone through, and bones were found in it by Ertl and his team. And then somehow they're going through it again after that, and now finding more. I mean, that's just suspicious to me. Extremely, it's just extremely suspicious. So, but there we go. We have 4 of them. But the thing is, in documents coming up, number 645, which what I would call burn barrel 4, right? Like, disappears. And it's funny because that's the one burn barrel that was sent back to Avery salvage on the 7th. Kind of the early evening of the 7th. It was sent back to Avery salvage yard. The next day on the 8th, Ken Kratz was specifically asking for it to be brought back to storage. And it's weird because it seems to like drop off of the documentation in a way here. So, alright. So that's what I wanted to show you here. That is what these barrels are. They are the Yonda barrels, and this is burn barrel 2. So it's extremely bizarre. They're finding bones on it after it's already been gone through by the crime scene tech and his team. Lead crime scene tech and his team. So, alright. Moving to the next one. Okay, so this is further down the page where it goes through more of the chain of custody on these things. So 1 through 5, obviously those are the items that we're interested in, particularly 1 through 4. I'm sorry. Items, yes, 1 through 4 are the ones we're mainly interested in, right? But that's fine. 1 through 5. 1 through 5 are going where? From Jeremy Hawkins to John Ertl, the lead crime scene technician, and what's this? Crime lab techs. Okay, on 11/7, just like I said, right? Okay, so then we have here 1 through 5 on 11/7. It's John Ertl bringing it back, and Jeremy Hawkins is taking it back. Custody. Okay, there you go. Then you have on 11/7 here, Jeremy Hawkins releasing it to Kenneth I'm not sure what that is, but it's transport to trailer. Well, we know that burn barrel 4 went back to Avery salvage. Well, here it's showing, I believe that's showing 4 and 6. It looks like 4, then with a little comma, like it was added in, and like it was only meant to be 6. But like somebody added 4, so they had a, it looks like a little small 4 with a little comma right there, and then 6. Okay? Transport to trailer. Now here's the interesting thing. Here we are with 6. Only 6 comes back to be returned into evidence. Right? So isn't that interesting? And then look at how they have it logged from here on out. Instead of saying 1 through 5 like they did up here, it's 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. Right? And that's to the crime lab here, retrieved from the crime lab. And then here, this is on 11/12, like the document was just saying, where it's being processed by DCI. And that's when they're saying they found these bones in it. Like the crime scene technicians would have missed some bones or something. I mean, it's just bizarre to me that this would even be, but here it is in the chain of custody. You can see it, how impossible it basically is, right? Okay, so there you go. We have a mysterious disappearing barrel, and you obviously can see they're logging it differently because it's now gone. Okay, and that's why I think this is a 4,6, where both these items went out, but only one comes back. So I just think that's interesting. So, all right, moving to the next one. So here we have on December 19th, Jeremy Hawkins, Deputy Jeremy Hawkins, has been asked by Investigator Wiegert to locate the following items and transport them to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab in Madison by Deputy Rick Reamer of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. With the help of Deputy Reamer, the following items were loaded into an enclosed trailer. All right, 3 55-gallon barrels with miscellaneous items inside bearing property tag numbers 642, 643, 644. Okay, so those would be the Yonda burn barrels 1 through 3. 4 is gone, mysteriously disappeared. A 50-gallon burning barrel that was 1/2 full of material bearing the property tag number 7102, and 2 other metal barrels with burnt material bearing property tag numbers 7921 and 7922. So there's 3 barrels. So this is a total of 6 barrels that are being shipped over to the crime lab. So, very interesting. So, anyways, and like I said, the original burn barrel number 4 is gone, and we suddenly have 2 other metal barrels. Is how they don't, that's about it. They don't even say if they're 50-gallon, 55-gallon, how many. They don't give any further description other than 2 other metal barrels, which I just find frustrating and strange. All right, so this is the first picture I'm going to show you. First thing I'm going to point out is that this barrel here is significantly shorter than this barrel here, 55-gallon, right? The other thing that bothers me about this is that we've just been reading the reports about how they were examining these on the 12th. You know why I see this and realize they probably filled the reports out the day after, because right here is RJP, that's Pivito, who we saw referred to in the reports that I just showed you. So here is this barrel being mixed in with all the other barrels, and when it comes down to it, my main question is was this barrel used to bring something from the deer camp? Because you guys may notice something right down here. So here, let's switch to a different
image, maybe a little closer up. All right, so it seems to me here on this smaller 50-gallon, obviously, barrel, that down here it looks like, this looks to me like a D right here with a very rounded type of style is what I'm noticing, right? And this looks like a rounded, like a E, but it's like rounded instead of being sharp corners on the spine of the E. And it looks like to me D-E-E-R. It looks like it's going around saying deer camp. That's really to me what it looks like is happening there. And if so, why is there a deer camp barrel being, mixed in with all these other barrels? I don't know. I just seriously, with what looks like this 3-card monte being played with these barrels in terms of the evidence ledgers and things like that, it gives me a great deal of concern. But clearly, if that says deer camp, I mean, it's making me wonder, was this barrel where they actually maybe found Teresa's phone and camera at the deer camp, and that it was substituted as one that was out in front of Avery's trailer on the border of the Avery property in the cornfield? So I don't know. For me, it's a significant enough question because there's obviously some games being played in terms of burn barrels. Because, like I said, they're saying that they're finding bones after their crime scene technician and his entire team went through it, and then they're saying they're finding more bones and that everything. It's really bizarre. I tell you, it's bizarre. Like as if crime scene tech Ertl and his team would have missed any. I don't know. That's just bizarre to me. It truly is. So, all right. Those are the issues with the burn barrels that I thought I would point out today. Thank you to Moving On 04, Wrecking Crew member. Thank you to Rubber Ducky, who also did a video about this previously. And thank you to Mill Billy, who's also been talking a lot about this subject. I just wanted to go ahead and add that to this particular video of the evidence against Stephen Avery because I think it's significant when you see this seeming 3-card monte that they seem to be playing with the burn barrels. So thought I'd point it out. Okay, so that is the evidence against Stephen Avery, part 3, the bullet and the barrels. I think I've pointed out here pretty clearly with the bullet. I mean, number one, there's all the fishiness with the DNA, the testing of it, the filing of the deviation, so everything about that is just questionable. All right, the finding of it, the fact that it had to be there when that when that crack was jackhammered, right? It had to be there then, yet it has no dust on it. It's sitting on top of the dust somehow, and it's lead. Remember how? Okay, folks out there who understand this, lead is one of the heaviest elements. It doesn't make sense that it would be floating on top of the concrete dust. That doesn't make any sense. And the fact that no concrete dust is stuck to it is also strange, and that there's none in the little concave shape on top of the bullet. All these things are a huge problem and cry out, false, really. Then you take the fact that bullet has been analyzed now. There's no trace of bone or anything that it might encounter going through a human body. There's only traces of wood and what would appear to be paint, particles of paint. That's what's there. Nothing to indicate that it ever passed through a human body in any way, shape, or form. Okay? So these are the problems with the evidence, right? And then, like I said, with the burn barrels, the whole situation with the burn barrels, with this whole 3-card monte type of record keeping that they got going on, and it's just, yeah. These are the reasons why those of us who dug into the documents on this continue to have problems with this investigation, because you continue to go to the documents expecting those to be accurate or help you figure out what happened here, and you just find more BS, just like what you see here today. I'm maybe being a little exaggeratory, but it is like a 3-card monte with these burn barrels. The way, where did burn barrel 4 go? Right? Where'd it go?
basically, you know, it's 1 through 5 at the beginning of that ledger. Then it's 1, 2, 3, 5. You know what I mean? Where'd it go? Right? The other interesting thing about that, before we go, is that when Bobby Dassey is asked at trial how many burn barrels they had, he says 3. Isn't it funny that out of those 4 barrels, one of them eventually ends up disappearing in the evidence ledgers and in the investigation reports? Isn't that intriguing? Because they even tell him, oh, wasn't there 4 or whatever? He goes, oh, whatever, I remember 3. Now that's his like response to it. Okay, and then we have one of the burn barrels that kind of just suddenly mysteriously disappears. Doesn't come back from a trip, and then is just not referred to anymore. It's just skipped over. Right? These are the odd things with this. So, you know, like I said, this is the Evidence Against Stephen Avery series. For those of you who are wondering when I'm going to be doing a video to kind of talk about the new photos that have recently come out, keep your eye out. I haven't gotten to that yet because I really wanted to get this video done this weekend about the bullet and about the barrels. So, but that will be coming, and I promised I would give 24 hours notice on that video. So literally when I finish it, I will make sure there's 24 hours of time before it airs. All right? Okay. That's about it for this video, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see ya.